Hello, everyone. Welcome to Book Club Date. That's my wife, Katy.
And that's my husband, Josh.
We are very excited. Katy, what's our book for book club?
For our first series, I suppose, probably 4 episodes, we are reading Lessons in Chemistry.
Ooh, look at that pink.
By Bonnie Garmus. I hope I'm saying that right.
Very nice. There. Yeah, we'll set this up here that way people can see it in whatever thumbnail.
I make no guarantees on name pronunciations.
That's fair.
Yeah, I read a quote one time that was something like, don't make fun of people mispronouncing words because they learn them by reading.
It's true. Very true. On that note, by reading, before we get into this, what else are you reading right now?
Currently, I am reading the Sweet Tea Witch series, which is like cozy paranormal mysteries.
Oh.
Yeah, really enjoying them.
Yeah?
Yeah, so
Is that the one with like 10? Or
yeah, so she has them bundled. She's got individual books and then she's got bundles of them. And so I think when I purchased books 1 through 10, it was like 99 cents. And I was like, oh, I'll give that a try. I might have actually gotten book 1 for free at one point and then was like, oh, I like this. And I like her writing and she's got good pacing, quirky, fun, small southern town of witches, magic, and mayhem ensue.
So by I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Just as someone from Tennessee, or when you say southern town, do you mean
like Alabama?
Okay, so it's like deep south.
Deep south.
Deep south. Okay. Because there's a difference, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, I am reading, in addition to this, I'm currently reading The Sword of Kagan.
Yeah.
I apologize in advance if it's pronounced Kagan, but I'm going to say Kagan. It is...
Which I found for you.
Yes, you did. You recommended it.
I did.
I am thoroughly enjoying it.
I haven't read it, though, but I heard it recommended by someone else and was like, oh, that sounds like a book Josh would like.
It's like this Avatar, The Last Airbender-esque meets... I guess the brutality of it is like Game of Thrones, you know, where it's like there are consequences, right? And I thoroughly enjoy it. I think it's really cool. It's a different take on like bending of elements and kind of how like their power manifests, and different families have different power levels, is what I've gathered.
Oh, interesting.
I will say it does not hold your hand on like there's a lot of. Again, I am not familiar with various different Asian cultures and stuff, but I assume some of the words I'm reading are Japanese.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're made up fantasy. I don't know. Either way, it's not really holding your hand. So like now that like I'm over 40% into the book, it kind of just like I know what that means now, like what this word means. Like, oh, we'll be done in a dunin or whatever, like whatever the word is, meaning we'll be done in like a flash is what I've basically gathered from it.
Yeah.
And there's just things like that where like I'm like I don't know what that means, but it's a fantasy world.
That can be
so
tricky. You're
supposed to
with
get immersed.
Is they kind of make up some of their own words.
Correct. Which isn't bad, but
and it's common. It's just sometimes it takes you a minute to
and I would say it does go a little far with it, but it's also it's distinctly its own fantasy style, and I am thoroughly enjoying it. I recommend it. Maybe I'll do a solo video about it because it's really good.
Nice.
Anyway, let's dive into this book. Tell us about the synopsis of this book. Tell us what Lessons in Chemistry is about.
Okay, so we're talking about like the 1950s into the 60s, and Elizabeth Zott is the main character. She has a dream of being a scientist, but society causes some challenges to that, primarily with the belief that women belong only in the domestic sphere, so around the house, caring for children, cooking, cleaning, that kind of thing. And so her desire to be a scientist and work and make discoveries and perform experiments and stuff, that's just not normal for the time, or at least not considered socially acceptable. And so there's a lot of challenges with that. It was considered primarily men's work. So at one point, she accepts a job on a TV cooking show and sets out to teach a nation of housewives more than just the recipes that she's teaching. And we do learn that she naturally comes by cooking quite well, as she has a chemistry type background.
She's like a more sciencey Julia Child.
Yeah.
Sort of, but like more like, I don't know if we've actually had her hair color described, but she's like more mainstream lipstick feminine, right? Like that's like the term sometimes, right?
Yeah, she's described as being like a conventional beauty.
Right. Okay, well,
so exceptionally pretty, exceptionally smart.
Yeah. The writer of this is Bonnie Jean Garmus. Bonnie Jean Garmus was born in 1957. She's an American author and former copywriter from Seattle. She has worked as a creative director as well in the U.S., and she has also lived in Switzerland and Colombia. In April 2022, her debut novel, Lessons in Chemistry, was published. And I believe this is also an Apple TV series, right?
It is. Yeah. It is. If y'all want to see a video on our opinions on that, let us know. But we're not going to watch it until after we've read the book.
Correct. Not that there's anything wrong with watching something and then reading a book.
No, there's always. Yeah. I've heard different people have different opinions on that, but it's just the way this is working. We're gonna read first,
right,
and then we might watch the show and review that, and it would present some interesting comparisons, I think. But great for her to get a option for film so quickly, right? If it published in April of 22, and it's already an Apple Plus series, like that's really quick.
It's just one of those ones that what's her name? I forget her name. The actress, now entrepreneur producer. She sold her production company to Apple TV.
Oh, Reese Witherspoon.
I wonder if this is one of hers.
Oh, maybe.
It's got the vibe because she's got like a whole book club that she like recommends.
Yeah.
Various, like she's got like a whole following, and she's apparently, from my understanding, very good at just finding books, or at least maybe the team around her is. But I don't know if this is her or not. I don't know. I don't know if it's got her thumbprints on it.
If you guys know, let us know in the comments if this was a Reese's book club pick.
Right. Okay, so now we're going to move into the actual discussion of this book. This is your official spoiler and speculation warning. So we are covering chapters 1 through 11. Kate and I have busy lives and we read other things. So we basically choose a book every month to read, and then we revisit each other once a week, sit down, catch up on what we've read about the book, and we discuss it. And that includes spoilers and speculation. So if you don't want that, as Katie just said, you've been warned. So, or if you don't care, you're welcome to hang out. If you do need to go away because you don't want spoilers, please like, subscribe, and then come back whenever you're ready. So, Katie, you gave us the synopsis. You did such a good job.
Oh, thank you.
Such a good job. Could you summarize story and characters for us?
Basically, we find out in the very beginning that she has a daughter, that Elizabeth has a daughter. And at that point, we get a little bit of how she got onto this cooking show. The daughter of this producer was eating her daughter's lunch, and apparently she creates these amazing meals for her daughter. And that's kind of where we leave that. We don't actually see, in the part that we've read so far, we don't actually see her with the cooking show yet. So we're getting a lot of background for her. And I'm thinking in the next chunk, we're going to move forward into getting more of where she's at now. So we're learning about her relationship with Calvin, and he's this brilliant scientist. He's known for holding grudges and having a brilliant mind and being an incredible rower. Yes, he was on the rowing team. And he wanted to go to Harvard, didn't get in, or something happened there, and he ended up going to Cambridge.
Yeah, Calvin's got, you could say justifiably, a bit of an ego.
A little bit, yeah. And it's said that he's not like conventionally handsome, but he's got a great smile. So when he smiles, he's very attractive. But when he doesn't, he's presumably quite intimidating.
Yeah.
Just with the brilliance of his mind. And he very much prioritizes weather patterns. And that's how he came to live in California, which is where we find Elizabeth. Now, she had completed her master's degree, and the guy that she was studying with, the doctor and the guy who ran that program sexually assaulted her. So I think that's important to mention because I was not expecting that, and that can be difficult to read.
Yeah,
at least it was very quick, and she got revenge on him. You know, she stabs him with a pencil. But again, like, the authorities, the cops don't believe that this older man would assault her. Why was she there? Obviously, it was her fault. None of which is true. And so she is not allowed to pursue her doctoral program that she's wanting to do.
Yeah, they basically, a committee basically says, like, well, maybe it's best if we just part ways, is essentially what happens.
Yeah, so she doesn't get the opportunity to study what she wants to study for her doctoral thesis and stuff. And apparently it's going to be groundbreaking. I should have written down what it's like, angiosynthesis or something like that. She ends up working for the same company that Cal works for. She meets Cal when she goes to steal some beakers because she needs some for her research, what she's doing. And he's kind of a jerk about it, but also kind of like enchanted by her. They re-meet again, and he's on a date, ends up getting sick, and I thought that was kind of a funny scene because Elizabeth is very like perfunctory about it. Like, he throws up on her and she's just like, clearly you're not well, let's get you home. Like,
she's like, oh, well, that sucks.
Yeah,
okay.
She handles it quite well, actually.
Yeah.
So she gets him home, takes care of him, and they basically start up a friendship. And it kind of lingers in that friends, but they both clearly like each other, and they're kind of trying to hint at that, but they're not good at like flirting with each other. Like, yeah. And by them not being good, like, they think they're being obvious with each other, and they are not.
Right. And combine that with the very strong personalities that both of them have, and that leads to fireworks. It can also lead to just some general explosions and hot-headedness that happens. So,
yeah. But they do finally end up in a relationship and moving in together. And Cal proposes. She does not want to get married, though. He gets her to start rowing with him. Eventually, he finds out that she does not know how to swim. If you're going to let someone convince you to do something like rowing on the water, but you can't swim, that's a point where I would say you need to speak up and share that kind of vital information, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of pride in this character.
Yeah.
Like, to a fault, you know?
Yeah.
I mean she's designed, and she is imperfect, and that's fine.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's pride to a fault.
It
Definitely.
is. Yeah.
I had the same thought. I was like, just tell him you can't swim.
Yeah, like that can be solved. You can learn how to swim. Like, that's not a problem. But maybe tell him. And I did kind of think it was funny that his solution was, let's get her to row a men's like 8, like a
crew of 8 instead of the 2.
Yeah. So that was his initial reaction, rather than, like, my first impression would be like, oh, let's get you some swim lessons. Like that, I feel like that, like, doing the 8 is fine. Like, right, we can talk about that too, but maybe let's get some swim lessons as well. I think that would be also one of the first steps you might want to take.
They have a ready, fire, aim approach, those two, which is like,
that's a good description.
Makes for some pretty humorous moments throughout the reading.
Yeah.
Definitely.
They get a dog. His name is 630. Totally connects with them. They bring him to work. Cal's like, oh yeah. She's like, he can't come to work with us. That's not allowed. And Cal's like, yeah, he can. And like, one person says something to Cal, and he's like, oh, well, no one's complained to me about it. And like, that's the end of it. They're just like, everyone's afraid of Cal because he's got this reputation for holding grudges. And so no one really wants to rock that boat. And because he's a brilliant mind, and they get, like, this company, they get a ton of funding because he's there, because he's like that brilliant.
Mm-hmm. The ending of this.
The ending of this
first
holy
reading.
cow.
Yes, which you actually you and I had a slight miscommunication. I said read chapters 1 through 10. I meant 1 through 11. So
just now.
Katie's pretty raw.
Just read
with what
chapter
happened.
11. Well, so chapter 10 is like he was dead 37 minutes later, and that's where it ends. So I'm like, oh my God, and I've got to stop here?
Yeah, and it's in that ending of that chapter is written in such a way to where you're not 100% certain if it's about Calvin or 630 because there's some foreshadowing that basically 630 is always right next to either Calvin or usually Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's very much attached to the hip. They don't think he needs a leash, but there's a new local law where it's like, hey, all your dogs need a leash, and Elizabeth is concerned. She's like, okay, well, let's give him a leash because he is scared of fireworks. He has had instances where he's run in the past, and she tells Calvin, please use a leash with him going forward. She doesn't say that verbatim, but that's what's implied basically.
Yeah.
Calvin likes to go on runs, and he takes 630 with him, and he almost leaves the house with 630 without the leash. He looks at it, but then because Calvin swallows his pride, meaning he develops as a character, he takes the leash and he puts 630 on it. He goes for his run, and he's going to run to the office to meet with Elizabeth, right? And he's going to do lunch or breakfast.
She got up
or
early and went in already and was just like, I'll see you there.
And long story short, because he utilizes that leash, 630 gets spooked by a loud noise. I think it's a tailpipe backfiring or something.
It is.
Yeah, like something
one of the police
cars.
Cruisers. Yeah. Freaks out 630.
And he runs and he tugs on.
He tries to pull one way. Calvin tries to pull another way. Calvin ends up slipping in an oil spill, basically, and cracks his head.
Yep. And then
the gosh darn police car backs up over him.
And that's probably what does it.
And snaps the leash, so 630 runs off a ways.
It hits hard.
And then, some of the irony of that is that he was so worried about keeping Elizabeth alive because all of his family passed in tragic accidents.
Mm-hmm.
So we find out that his parents were killed in a car wreck when he was like 4. And then when he was 5, his aunt that was taking care of him passed away in another tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because of all the losses, he's very paranoid about like everyone I love gets taken from me in this tragic way. And so he's very concerned about like, oh no, I love this woman. She's going to be taken away from me in a tragic way.
Right.
And so we find out that he's doing all these things to try and take care of her. So that's one of the reasons why when he finds out she can't swim, he's like, okay, let's get into a 8-person crew team. You know, he also tries to take care of her in other ways. She really wants to be on her own with her work accomplishments and stuff. And he kind of tries to manipulate things too, to like help her because she's like, no, I don't want help. Like she's got too much pride for that. She's like, no, I don't want your help. Okay. And he's like, you need it though, because, you know, unfortunately you're a woman and this isn't fair. Like, I don't think he realized that her situation was unfair until she kind of was like, no, I can't get this because of this. And he's like, but your ideas are brilliant. You should be able to get this. Like, this isn't fair. So she definitely kind of opened his eyes to some of the unfairness in society.
Right.
And what she's facing. Like, it's not that he doesn't care. I think it's really just he's never thought of that. Like, it just didn't cross his mind. Like, he is so like in his science world that it just there's almost blinders to like the rest of the world. Right.
My general impressions of Elizabeth is she complains about presumptions that society makes. She herself makes presumptions every other line of thinking she has. She does, and you know, I mean, you get into the weeds of philosophy and all that, and everyone has presumptions and like a baseline of how they understand the world and stuff. But you know, but I found her to be a brilliant character, phenomenally written. She's imperfect. There's moments where you're like cheering for her. There's other moments like the swimming thing where you're just like, why? Don't you just do this? It's such a simple solution. So what are your first impressions of the book and Elizabeth? I don't think I would be her friend, but I would certainly, like, if she was real. I don't know.
I think I could be.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, but I would, right, like, I would kind of, like, take some of her stuff with, like, a grain of salt, right? But,
yeah,
like, I don't know. I think it's easier for me to, like, kind of look at things from different people's perspectives and viewpoints and kind of be like, you know, kind of question, oh, well, why would you think that? What have you been through that would cause you to think this way or act this way? I think it would be quite amusing, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, I think she'd be...
Like, would we get along all the time? Probably not. But when we did, I think I would have a fun time. Like,
right.
Some of the stuff she would say would probably be over my head a little bit. But I think I can relate somewhat. Like, she's very logical.
Right.
And part of me can relate quite strongly to that.
I get that.
And I think could have, like, an appreciation for that, you know?
Right.
And at the very least, you would get to try some good food.
That's true. Because she clearly likes to cook.
Yeah.
That one scene where she's like...
in the kitchen cooking.
Yeah, she's like whisking the eggs, but then she says, I'm emulsifying the eggs.
I'm breaking the bonds. And
yeah, she's breaking it all down to, like, its chemistry function, right?
Yeah, and she's, like, explaining her cooking in a very chemistry-centric way to 630, the dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really cute. You know, and speaking of 630, you mentioned it earlier. The decision that the writer Bonnie uses for 630 at times to write from his point of view, it makes for humorous moments because it's a third party perspective, and it really shows how dysfunctional Calvin and Elizabeth can be in their relationship. So maybe that's why she did it to ensure the humor.
It also gives you a more a more intimate third party view of their private lives that you wouldn't get otherwise.
That's true.
You know, like when they're at home, then okay, you've got either his perspective or her perspective, but adding 630's perspective gives you a third. Yeah,
he's very much a dog. He loves them both, and he's impartial about it.
Yeah,
which is like how he's written, and it's it's fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoy him, and I think he provides some contrast too, because Calvin and Elizabeth are both quite logical and science-minded, and 630 is not, because he's a dog.
Yeah, he's a doggy.
He's more like, I don't know, more emotionally focused, if that makes sense.
This book is about feminism. It's a fictional story, but I think there's a lot of reality to it, and a lot that especially women.
I don't think you could write a book following
can, like, relate to
a woman set in that time period and not touch on that.
Right.
You know?
So this is like the 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a contemporary equal to, like, the things that Elizabeth deals with, right? I mean, obviously we have the whole the Me Too movement and all that, right? So like the whole sexual assaulting that she undergoes, I feel like there's actually been some pretty great strides made with that, and like the cultural mindset.
I think there have been a lot of strides made. Now, are there still issues? Absolutely. I don't know many women who could look back on their lives and say that they've never faced anything. You know, like, I know I haven't faced a ton, but like, for example, I play a predominantly male instrument, right? So most low brass players, and I play euphonium or baritone horn, we don't really observe the difference. In the US, there is a difference, but we're not going to go into that today. Primarily with low brass, when I was in high school and college, it's mainly guys that play, right? Very few women. Like when I was auditioning at different schools, there were a couple times where the guys auditioning could not wait to get to the guy after me. Like there was one where I was standing in the hall and they were like, oh, hi, we'll get you next. And then there was this other guy and they were like, oh, hi, like just fawning over this guy. I don't know who he was, if he had a reputation or something. It didn't seem like they knew him in advance, but they were like, oh, we just have to get through her and then we'll get to you. Like, they just could not wait to get to him. And I was like, okay, well, I'm auditioning you as well, and you have not passed the test.
You have failed.
You have failed. That's not okay.
On like an interpersonal question that like I had, he absolutely could have put more effort into it, but they really seem like a match. Why does Elizabeth say no to Calvin's proposal?
I think especially at that time, if you got married, you were expected to change your name. Mm-hmm. Even though he said he was okay with her not, he also admitted that he did hope that she would.
Right.
Which I get. But then her name would be forever tied to his. And like she said, you know, she was concerned about her research, her contributions being solely attributed to him. And so she wanted to make a difference herself and get that acknowledgement for herself. And I'm not sure if she was fully like, oh, I'm, you know, if I am able to make some strides in this area, I can show that women are just as capable of this kind of research. Or if it was just kind of a pride thing, like, I want the recognition. Like, if I'm doing this work, I want my own recognition, darn it. Like, So I'm not completely sure which it was. And, you know, that's up to each individual woman. I have known several who have established careers prior to getting married. And then that's a very real decision because they are known then with their maiden name. And do they change it? And sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they will change it personally, right? Like they'll change it with the Social Security office and on their credit cards and stuff. But professionally, they might keep it as their maiden name. And it just depends on like the industry.
Leading up to that scene, the co-workers observing Calvin and Elizabeth, I think is probably one of the funniest parts of the book. Just their gossip. And there's I forget the character's name, but someone says in passing, they're just like, yeah, they're sleeping together. And this one guy's like, yeah, why buy the cow and you can get the milk for free? And this other guy chimes in. He goes,
well, I grew up on a farm.
Yeah, he's like, I grew up on a dairy farm. Cows ain't easy, or something like that.
Yeah, it's not easy to take care of a cow.
Yeah, like
taking care of cows is a lot of work.
Yeah, and you know, and just the humor that I think Bonnie Garmus does through, you know, situational humor is, she's really good at it. She's really, I think, fantastic at it. And I got more than I thought in terms of just like chuckling to myself as I was reading. And it almost like dialogue back and forth almost comes like Aaron Sorkin West Wing, right? Where like it's very like back and forth.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you thought about the pacing.
It works really well for this kind of book. Whenever it's based, even if it's a fictional story and it's based in our world that we know, like say it's not fantasy, say it's not sci-fi and everything. Because whenever you do that, you inevitably have to kind of describe the world, describe how it functions to a degree, right? Yeah. Whereas if it's based in realism, at least, you don't have to explain all that, right?
Right.
I know how a dog works. I know how leash laws work.
Right.
I know some basic chemistry things, right? I know how labs generally, at least via movies, how labs function and work.
Right.
Right. So like, I don't need that explained to me. And I think it allows the writer just to fully focus on the story and obviously the characters. And I think very often that's to a benefit, because there's times when like you're reading a book, it's just very long description about the environment.
Yeah.
Or
almost a lot of fluff.
Yeah. And you're just kind of like, just move on with the story. And this is refreshing because it moves. I mean, like you will turn pages on this book. It's just an incredibly well-written book. It's incredibly well-paced. I don't think there's been a single chapter or page that I have been like, well, that could have just been left on that could have just been left on the table. Right.
Right.
You know, like every single thing that she includes, develops the character or pushes the narrative forward, and oftentimes it does both. And she's obviously really good at that, at least so far. Again, remember, this is just chapters 1 through 11. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. We hope that you've enjoyed it so far. The next episode, which will be part 2 of 4, this is part 1 of 4, we will be covering up to and including chapter 23. Right, Katie? So we'll be reading up to and including chapter 23.
Read chapter 23.
So if you want to come back and join us for the next episode, which will be next week, you're more than welcome to. We appreciate you watching and sharing your time with us.
Remember to like and subscribe.
That's my wife, Katie.
And that's my husband, Josh.
This has been Book Club Date.
Thanks for joining.
We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.